Recording with external microphone. System sound volume set to 100%.
Hello everyone. This is my fifth voice note to you, and we have already covered introduction to English poetry right from the beginning up to the 1970s in detail, and uh, I have referred to some of the important happenings even after 1970, though that is not directly relevant to our course. Now, in this voice note, I'd like to explain, you see, how to understand poetry. Understanding poetry is an art, and when we try to understand prose and try to understand poetry, our approaches to the two are different. Though, of course, in some way they are the same, they have common features also. But understanding poetry is an altogether different thing. You see, first of all, poetry, the word poetry comes from the Greek word poesy, Poesy, and the Greek word for the poet is poesis, Poesis, which means a maker or creator. So the poet makes or creates. Now, you see, poetry is very often like music. That is, when you listen music or to a song, you don't really care for words, do you? You see, people who go to the mushairas, for instance, they chant wah wah wah, and if you ask them the meaning of the couplet, maybe they would not be able to explain. But in their hearts, you know, they know that they uh, do, understand the meaning, though they may not be able to understand it. Similarly, if you hear a song being played on an instrument, there are no words, but just by tune, you would be able to tell the words of the song. So the poetry also is of the same nature. Now, you see, the poet is a creator. He creates and presents before us his creation. Various formal elements such as images, symbols, rhythm, tone, sound patterns um, in the poem are important for us. Sound patterns, not just rhymes, but there are sound patterns other than the rhyme. For example, we have alliteration, the repetition of consonant sounds, or assonance, the repetition of vowel sounds. There are long use of long vowel sounds. Wordsworth, for example, said, "In the length of 5 long winters." So long, or a prolonged vowel sound here shows how time became a burden for him. 5 long winters. Winters are always the same, they are neither long nor short. But you see, he says 5 long winters. So the word long and the use of long vowel sound suggests that it became a burden for him. So this is how the poets, create meaning through various formal elements. Uh, Now, what we need to do, you see, we need to give a poem at least 3 readings with proper accent, proper intonation. First, we need to read a poem in the proper way, and once we stop reading, we should ask ourselves our feelings. We should be sure whether it's about something sad, or whether it has a happy note, or is there a mixed feeling, or is there a puzzling feeling, irritating feeling, what kind of feeling. Don't worry about the meaning in the beginning. Now spot the feeling, and then in the second reading, you know, spot a few words and phrases that support your feeling and idea. Uh, Now, by this time, you should make sure that you have understood the theme of the poem. Think over it, try to express it in your words, in a word or in a phrase. Once you have done this, then give it a third reading, and with the help of formal elements which I mentioned earlier, that is, rhythm, tone, music of words, images, symbols, and um, certain words are keywords in the poem. Uh, with the help of those words, you begin to interpret the theme right from the first line up to the end. Um, you see, this pattern will help you enjoy poetry as well. And what is important is that not, I mean, understanding is not the only purpose. You see, the thing is that when we begin enjoying a discipline or a form of discipline, we begin understanding it as well. Read as many poems as possible, and you will develop a taste for it. And apply the technique, you know. In the beginning, you may even be required to give more than three readings in order to be able to find out the minor details. But, you know, uh, don't get fed up of it. Just keep on reading and reading, and all the time, don't bother about whether you understand all of it or not. Just enjoy the music within, just enjoy the sounds, the rhythm, etc. And gradually you would begin to understand the poems as well. I don't know how many of you have a taste of poetry, but I'll try to train you as good, sensitive readers of poetry if you respond well. Um, Now, you see, uh, this in fact is a short audio note. As I said in the beginning, um, the intention is to let you know the technique. I'll try to demonstrate this technique if possible while doing the texts also. I'll illustrate various formal elements and how to analyze them. All you have to do is to read and develop a taste for it, a liking for poetry. Once you develop that, then half of your problem is solved. Um, uh, don't get confused. Don't be frightened of it. Don't take it as a burden. Take it as a thing of pleasure, you know, a thing of pleasure, just as you listen to the songs as a pastime. Read a few poems, you know, you may read Urdu poetry or Hindi poetry also. Now, I can give you examples as to how the poets make use of sounds. Yeats, a poet in our course, he composed a poem called The Second Coming, in which he talks about the movement of history, for which he uses the word gyre. Gyre is a circle. Now, in the first line of his poem, turning and turning in the widening gyres. Now, notice the alliteration, turning and turning. It gives you a sense of movement of time. In the widening gyre, wide is a long vowel sound. It shows how the gyre or the circle is widening and how the time's passing. So the poets use this technique quite a lot. The famous Urdu poet Iqbal, in one of his poems called Mukalamae Jibrilo Iblis, a dialogue between Gabriel and Satan. In one of that line, he says, "मैं खटकता हूँ दिले यज़दा में कांटे की तरह." Now, just as a thorn pierces, so that that pain of piercing is expressed with
Screen.
the t sound, you know, खटकता हूँ दिले यज़्दा में कांटे की तरह. So this way, you know, the poet very often used this technique. And as I said, if you recite a couplet properly in a proper tone, the meaning will come to you immediately. Um, like a couplet from Faraz, you know, तुम तकल्लुफ़ को भी इखलास समझते हो फराज दोस्त होता नहीं हर हाथ मिलाने वाला. So here, you know the word order is different, but what the poet says is clear. That is, everyone who shakes hands with you is not your friend. Well, nowadays nobody would shake hand with you, even if he is your friend. So this way, uh, you can easily understand poetry. So now, whatever I have told you, remember that background. You know, start practicing. Start practicing. You know, understanding poetry. Read a few poems from here and there. You have several poems in your course, especially core course poems and then elective English poems. You've studied uh, about 17 poems last session. Why not give one another go that you could not say enjoy because of the pressure of the exams last session? Give one poem a go and see how you understand it. Apply the technique that we just discussed. So refresh your mind, keep these things in mind, and prepare. And when we meet next, we will be taking up our first poem in our course, that is John Donne's A Lecture Upon Shadows. I'll give you the theme, dictate you the theme, the difficult words. I'll introduce metaphysical poetry to you and give an introduction to the poem, and then we will take up the text. So, until that time, God bless you all. Thank you very much.
Device unlocked. 420. Save. Pause. Button.